So what jobs can you do in the vegetable garden in May? And May is arguably one of the busiest months in the whole calendar. So by May we get to that stage of the year where many of us have already started sowing seeds and we've got seeds that are planted and ready to go out. And when we get to May, the temperature starts to increase to a point where we can start now thinking about putting those plants outside. Although sowing seeds and planting out, as important as they are only part of the process of growing vegetables. And in this video, I'll be sharing with you a number of jobs I'll be doing in May in my vegetable plots to make my vegetable growing season as productive as possible. And all the jobs that I'll be doing in my vegetable plot will be relevant to all sizes of vegetable plots, whether very small or maybe you've got a large vegetable growing space or allotments. And I hope it gives you one or two ideas of jobs that you might do in your own vegetable plots. Now, any vegetables that you do start indoors, whether that's a greenhouse, a polytunnel, or even inside the house, will need acclimatising to the outside conditions. Because they've been used to that lovely warm temperature indoors, it's really important you don't just plant them straight outside, because sometimes the shock of the temperature difference can result in the plants being unsuccessful. Now, this is a process called hardening off. So the process of hardening off is where you bring your vegetables outdoors for a period of time to try to get them to adjust and acclimatise to the outdoor temperatures. And May is the perfect time to harden off any vegetables that you started indoors. Now, over the last few weeks, what I've started to do with my vegetables in the daytime is bring them into this mini greenhouse here. And for some of the vegetables, I've even been taking them out of here and putting them outside so they start to get used to the different temperatures from the internal environments. And I'll do this throughout the month of May before I decide to put my vegetables in their final growing positions. Now, some vegetables like really warm temperatures anyway. I have a tray of 6 chili peppers here. These are a variety called jalapeno. And in the mini greenhouse I have another tray of a variety called DKN, hot chili peppers. And also inside I have a tray of sweet chili peppers. These are a variety called California Wonder. Now, chili peppers like warm temperatures anyway to germinate, and you have to be very careful with peppers indoors to make sure that they have got warm temperatures. So these will continue to go back indoors when needed if the temperature isn't high enough. Similar to tomatoes. I've got tomatoes here and 3 plants over here, and I have got another 6 plants, so I have 10 in total. 5 of a variety called Bomande, which are an outdoor bush variety, and the other 5 are a variety called Red Cherry. Now, these were started in January, and over April we've had varied temperatures, some of them sub-zero, so I've had to take these plants indoors, which is why it's always fantastic to grow in pots, because you can move them around. At the front here I have a variety of 5 cucumbers. These are all a variety called Marketmore 76, a fantastic variety of outdoor ridge cucumbers. But be cautious with cucumbers because they're very temperamental. They do not like the shock of being moved from temperatures, and they don't even being like transplanted very much and take a little bit of time to adjust. So if you are going to harden off cucumbers, ideally you want a temperature of 15 to 20 degrees as a minimum. I did make the mistake a few days ago of putting them here during the day, and they started to droop because they were just reacting to the cooler temperatures. So I've took them inside for the last couple of days and now they've recovered. So if you are going to harden off cucumbers, just bear that in mind. It might be better off to leave them indoors on a sunny windowsill during the evening and bring them out during the day. Other types of vegetables like lettuces and brassicas, these are kale, just in the polystyrene tray at the front here. They don't mind cooler temperatures, so they'll be perfectly okay with being hardened off during the month of May, because even if the temperatures got quite low, near to zero, these would still be okay in my mini greenhouse overnight. So hardening off is a really important thing to do when you've started vegetables indoors, and May is the perfect time to do it. You will need to keep an eye on the temperatures in your area of the world, and if you think that the temperatures are going to get too low, then temporarily you might need to take your vegetables into a warmer space during the hardening off process. So I'm going to leave these vegetables out now during the day. You can see it's a nice warm sunny day here. Temperatures of around about 14 or 15 degrees. At the time of filming this video we are near the end of April, and the temperatures will be similar at the beginning of May and then hopefully warm up as we go through the month of May. So hardening off your vegetables is a really important job to do in May. Now, when you start planting all those lovely vegetables that you've grown from seed outdoors, it's really important that you give them a good level of protection as well. Because even though you and I might like vegetables, so do insects and birds and other wildlife. And particularly at that vulnerable stage, when they're planted directly from seedlings into a raised bed or into the ground, they could be quite easily consumed in seconds if you don't protect them. I've made that mistake so many times before, and therefore I make a point now of protecting the vegetables as soon as I put them in the ground. One way of doing that is to use different types of netting. As you can see on the raised bed behind me, there's netting covering this raised bed. In this raised bed at the moment, I've got onions and rocket, but I am going to be putting lettuce in here over the next couple of weeks, so the netting is really important. Now, the type of netting that you select is crucial depending upon what vegetables you're growing. So, for example, vegetables like onions and rocket and lettuce, I'm really trying to stop the birds getting to them. But this type of netting is quite fine here. It has round about 10mm by 10mm squares, and the reason that this is good for certain types of vegetables because it will allow pollinators through the netting into the vegetables. So some vegetables and fruit, for example, like strawberries or any vegetable that grows a flower, and then the vegetable will need pollinating first. And therefore, if you use netting that hasn't got capacity for these insects to get inside the netting and pollinate, then your vegetables aren't going to grow. For keeping birds off, this type of netting is absolutely perfect. As you can see in this raised bed, I've got canes around the perimeter that have got plastic bottles on top, and then just lay the netting over that. However, if you're growing brassicas such as cabbages, cauliflowers, sprouts, swedes, kales, etc., this type of netting will not be suitable. You need something much finer, such as a scaffold or debris netting, or even a mesh, because all types of insects seem to like brassicas, and if you don't protect them thoroughly, then they will get eaten. They don't need to be pollinated because they don't produce flowers, so fine netting or mesh is fine because that will allow air, water and light into the vegetables. If you're in an area of the world where you have larger wildlife in the vicinity, such as deers, foxes, etc., you might need something a bit more robust. This is chicken wire, and you might need to build a chicken wire frame, which is a really thin mesh of metal that provides much more sturdy and robust protection for your vegetables. Now, I have made a video on my channel which shows you what type of netting to use for what type of vegetables, so make sure you check that out. I will put a link in the video description below. So just remember, when you do plant your vegetables outside, May is the perfect time to provide protection for them. Now, of course, as the weather conditions start to change, particularly warm up, we may get showers. That often creates a perfect environment for our vegetables to grow. However, in addition to that, it also provides a perfect environment for weeds to grow. And a really important job from May onwards is weed control. Now, over the next couple of weeks, this small area you see behind me is going to be completely cleared of all these weeds, and I will be planting vegetables in the area. So it will be initially clear, but when I start to plant my vegetables in there, the weeds will start to come back, and you will need to keep on top of them. It's a reality of vegetable growing. If you use a no-dig method of growing vegetables in your garden, just like I am over in the other side of my garden, then weeds are much less problematic. However, if you grow your vegetables traditionally, weeds are unavoidable. The job is much easier if you weed regularly. Now, weeding is one of the less enjoyable parts of vegetable growing, but nevertheless it's still really important, because just imagine I did have some vegetables in this area here and I allowed the weeds to grow. The weeds are competing with the moisture and the nutrients in that soil or in that compost, and therefore the vegetables are going to get less and they're not going to be as big, and they might not even survive. So weeding is really important, and particularly from May you'll notice that the weeds are growing faster and faster. So my advice is just do a little bit at a time. So just pick an area of your vegetable garden, particularly if you've got a large plot, and just dedicate a certain amount of time to it, picking the weeds out while they're small, and they'll come out really easily. If you let the weeds establish, some of the weeds can put down really deep roots, and suddenly it becomes a real task to take them out. So always make sure you weed on a regular basis, and May is the perfect time to continue with that process. So something we really have to start to pay attention to in May is watering or moisture retention for our vegetables. It is so important. Now, as the temperature starts to increase, any moisture that you put into your vegetables, into your compost or into your soil, is going to evaporate that much more quickly because of the warmer temperatures. So you do need to keep an eye on how much water you give your vegetables to make sure they get enough. And you may need to water your vegetables at least once a day, possibly even twice a day, depending upon the temperature. Now, for watering, the best time to water is always first thing in the morning or late in the evening when the temperature is at its coolest. That means that any water you put in the ground around your vegetables at that time is likely to be retained a lot longer because it won't evaporate as quickly in the higher temperatures. Now, something else linked to water retention that you can also do in May is start to think about mulching. Mulching is where you will put things like grass clippings or straw or other materials that can retain moisture around your vegetables. Here you can see in these pots I have potatoes, and they have got a layer of grass clippings on top to act as a mulch. Now, mulching will mean that you'll cover the surface of your compost or soil around your vegetables, and therefore any moisture that goes through the mulch and into the soil is going to evaporate much slower. Of course, mulching has another added benefit as well, because covering around your vegetables will cover the soil and therefore slow down the rate of weed growth. So something else well worth doing in May is using all of those grass clippings that you might put in your compost bin as a mulch around your vegetables. Now, when you get to May, you might be under the impression that the vast majority of your seed sowing is completed. And for many people, that might well be true. But if you really want to maximise the vegetable growing space that you have, you want to start to think about succession planting. That's where you're thinking about what crops you're going to plant to replace crops that have been harvested, and therefore grown as much veg as you possibly can in the growing areas that you have available. And that doesn't matter whether you have a smaller growing area like I have here, or you've got a large vegetable plot, or even an allotment. So May is the perfect time to look at what crops you've got planted and work out when those crops will be harvested and that ground will become available, and then what are you going to have ready to grow in next. And this is where my vegetable planner comes in really handy. I've got this Excel vegetable planner that I created, which has all my vegetables listed down the left hand side, and I can see across the whole of the growing year from January through to the end of December what vegetables I need to sow indoors, sow outdoors, plant out and harvest. So I can look at my vegetable planting calendar and decide once this crop is finished, what am I going to put in this place. I'll then go to my seed box and then start to work out which seeds I'm going to plant, because I've got so many different varieties. So for example, in the summer and autumn we like a regular supply of lettuce and spring onions. So what I'll be doing round about every 3 weeks is going to my lettuce seeds and spring onion seeds, which are in this box here, looking through the varieties I've got and then sowing a small amount of new seeds each time. That way, as I'm harvesting the lettuce, because I've got such a regular sowing pattern going on, I've got new lettuce plants to go in their place, and that then gives me this constant supply. I'll do the same with the spring onions. I'll also look at other vegetables that have completed and work out what I can grow and when. So as another example, those pots that you saw when I was talking about watering and mulching have potatoes in them. I'm probably going to start to harvest them around about August or September, and that is going to free up some of those pots for me to plant something else in. So what I'm going to do at that time, that's about the right time to start planting my Christmas potatoes. So I'll get some more seed potatoes and I'll put them in those pots and they'll be ready for Christmas. All the time I'm thinking about maximising the amount of vegetables that I can grow. So a really good job to do in May is to sit down, work out what you've already planted, work out what you're going to grow, and then decide when those vegetables will be harvested and that space becomes available, and have something ready to pop straight in there to maximise your harvest. Now, I've already given away thousands of my vegetable calendar, and if you would like a copy completely free, you'll find my email address in the description below this video, and all you've got to do is send me an email and I'll send you a copy of this completely free by return email. Something else that you might find of interest, there's a recent video on my channel giving you 10 suggestions for vegetables that you might want to sow in May. I'll also pop a link to that video in the video description below, so make sure you also check that video out. So there's my suggestions for jobs that you might think about doing in your vegetable garden or vegetable plot during the month of May. Of course, there are so many other jobs that you could potentially be doing depending on what type of fruit and vegetables you grow, your growing space, and other factors that might differentiate your growing space from others. But I'm hoping the suggestions I've made will give you 1 or 2 ideas for jobs that you could do in your vegetable plot during the month of May. If you're doing other jobs in May that you think would benefit other vegetable growers, then just pop a comment below this video, because it's always good to share ideas with other vegetable growers. I really hope you found the video useful and interesting, and also don't forget to check out the links to those videos that I've put in the video description below. And if you did like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit and veg and flowers and 1 or 2 recipe ideas, then don't forget to press the subscribe button. And I'll see you all on the next video.